Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Heavenly Parent Holy Community Oceania Hoon Dok Hae, and today is Unshield together with Reverend Seti Suafa. It is Tuesday, the 31st of May, or the 2nd of May in the 10th year of Chongyol Guk. So let's begin by offering a bow to our Heavenly Parent and true parents. Chariot, Kyombe, Paro. And let's recite our family pledge, both in Korean and English. Thank you.
가전맨세 2. 천일국 주인 우리 가족은 참 사랑을 중심하고 하늘 부모님과 참 부모님을 모시어 천주의 대표적 가정이 되며 중심적 가정이 되어 가정에서는 효자, 국가에서는 춘신, 세계에서는 성인, 천주에서는 선자의 가정의 도리를 완성할 것을 맹세하나이다.
Family pledge number 2. Our family, the owner of Chongyol Guk, pledges to represent and become central to heaven and earth by attending the Heavenly Parent and true parents. We pledge to perfect the dutiful family way of filial sons and daughters in our family, patriots in our nation, saints in the world, and divine sons and daughters in heaven and on earth by centering on true love. I'd like to ask Na if she could offer the opening prayer, please.
Good morning. Let's pray. Our beloved Heavenly Parents, true parents of heaven and earth and humankind, we're so grateful for our lives and for each day that we are awake to greet you. We really pray that your love, your presence can be with us as always, but we need to feel that. We need to feel your presence and know that you are with us. Father, we thank you for the brothers and sisters who are making so much sacrifices and focus, Father, on the mission. We have so much work to do to keep the Oceania region for you, Father, to prepare for heaven and to protect our brothers and sisters in our Oceania region. Father, I really pray for your wisdom, Father, among all the leaders in each nation of the Pacific, and also upon our President Hori and Reverend Utaka and all the national leaders. I pray for your protection and pray, Father, that you can, Father, speak through our Reverend Seti today, and each of us can really receive inspiration and also again feel your love, Heavenly Father. I offer this prayer with all my heart and true parents' holy names. Bless Central Families. Jew.
Thank you. And let's give a warm welcome to Reverend Seti as he shares this morning. Thank you.
So good morning, everyone. Good morning, Reverend Utaka, brothers and sisters. So tomorrow is our Independence Day celebrations beginning for our Samoa 60th anniversary. So I felt it was good to share a little bit of insight into our new Prime Minister, First Lady Prime Minister for Samoa. And just before that, I just wanted to read something from Father's speech regarding the Pacific Rim. Future of humankind rooted in the future of the Pacific Rim region. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask that you closely analyze the current state of affairs in the world and in the Pacific Rim. Although communism days are gone, even now powerful nations such as China, Russia are constantly on the lookout for opportunities to aggressively pursue their own interests with the powerless and small island nations. Regardless of what nation it may be, no small island nation by itself can deal with these powerful surrounding nations and their economic, political, or even military ambitions. So those nations are so powerful that if they wanted to, they could dominate any of the smaller nations in a single day without shedding blood. Only when peace and security are settled in the Pacific Rim can peace for all humankind be guaranteed? As I said, the small island nations by themselves will not be able to stop the incredible tsunami of powerful nations moving into the region. Time has come, therefore, for all the small island nations in the Pacific Rim sphere to unite as one. Small island nations dispersed in both the northern and southern regions of the Pacific, either side of the equator, as well as Japan, Taiwan, Philippines, Indonesia, Singapore, Solomon Islands, Australia, New Zealand, and other countries, should enter into an agreement as one body to sustain peace throughout the Pacific Rim sphere. This will secure peace and stability for all people. The oceanic era that has begun represents the women's era. The Pacific Rim region must fulfill its mission as the vehicle for creating the culture of the oceanic sphere, which is the sphere of women's culture. It transcends nations and transcends the ocean itself. So please inscribe this in your hearts. Again, I say to you who have come to this meaningful occasion, please engrave this message on your hearts. The families of your good ancestors in heaven are blessed, numbering in the billions. They have come to the earth today, hearing this message with you. They too must perfect themselves, and they do so through you, their descendants. Thereby they advance to the position of true parents, true teachers, true owners and lords. Furthermore, they must become one in heart and body with true parents, King of Kings. They must uphold true parents' standard absolutely, take an active role in carrying out their works, and be mobilized for the creation of the kingdom of heaven on earth and in heaven through a life of service and attendance. Please don't forget that in this way, the spirit world and the physical world exist as one entity and move and breathe together. So with that as a backgrounder, you know, as national leader, of course, trying to understand more about the new government as they come in. And so I thought I'd share these couple of videos just to introduce our Prime Minister. But so the first video is about Fiame Naomi Mataafa. She's the daughter of the original Prime Minister from independence, and we are coming into our 60th year as a nation. So I think overall, and then after that, the next video is just her talking about the Pacific and her views on things, and there's some question and answers. So I hope there's enough time if we chop through these videos, okay? But for us as we listen, I thought that you know, with UPF, WFWP, and IAYSP as some of the UN connected NGOs, really this is a time that we need to deal directly with governments, you know, as we see Cambodia, you know, connecting with UPF officially as a nation. I think in the Pacific, really, this is a precedence that we can very much handle at this stage, and we need to operate on that kind of higher level as soon as possible. And certainly with Samoa, I feel it's one nation in which we can do that if we can do it properly. Yeah, thank you. So let me play the first video.
Masiofo Laulu Fetawi Malemau Fiame Mataafa became a politician in her own right as a Member of Parliament in the 1980s. She was Consulate General to New Zealand and also the
This is
first
Fiame's
Samoan
mother.
female scholarship to New Zealand.
I was spoiled because I grew up in that political environment, you know, and I suppose I always know I would end up in Parliament, you know. I was interested in politics.
One of Taui's skills is oratory, you know, and she probably has that a lot more than I would. She's a much more straightforward speaker.
Fiame would just ignore some of the things, where with me, I wouldn't ignore anybody who speaks
Fiame is a
out
Matai
of place
title
in Parliament, you know.
that the father
And
had,
as a
the original
Matai, I
Prime
would
Minister had,
get
and
up
now the
say,
daughter has.
that was out of order. I almost say your parents should teach you how to.
Well, I think, you know, I mean, Stowe trained as a teacher at Ardmore Teachers Training College. And I think quite a number of people who were in Parliament, when she was in Parliament, used to be her students. And I think they always had that sort of relationship with her. You know, once they saw Stowe, they didn't
Fitawi is the
necessarily
mother's
see
name.
her as another representative or a Faipule. They saw her as their teacher. And she was constantly telling them off.
My role as a diplomat, yeah, it was also intensifying in Samoa as a Matai, you know.
Matai is chief.
Of course, this is what I enjoy in my life. Lefa Samoa, I
Samoan
enjoy
way.
fighting in speeches with Makai Honye, you know, and it's great. It's really privilege and it's honor for me. And there are not many women in Samoa who are like that.
Masiofo Laulu Fetawi's work advocating the status of Samoan woman is a legacy that her daughter has continued, following in her footsteps as a Matai elected to government. Fiamea Naomi is currently the Minister of Education, Sports and Culture.
Is in the former government.
My friends in New Zealand that I went to school with, you know, when we meet up, they're always saying to me, when are you going to get a real job? You know, they're sort of going into politics and so forth. But, you know, that's just what I've been interested in. And I think there's a very natural progression from being a Matai to being a Faipule, you know, and so forth.
Faipule is
Although
minister.
Fiamea is one of only 6
Minister of
female
Government.
MPs in Samoa, for her, being a woman hasn't meant undue pressure.
It's really a non-issue in some ways in Samoa because you're there by virtue of being a Matai because, you know, and if there's one thing that men understand, you know, it's position and hierarchy and rank and stuff like that. So, you know, as guys, they understand that. So they're not about to sort of say, well, you know, that Matai is not so good because they're a woman Matai. Because, you know, a Matai is just a Matai.
In 2016 to September 2020, Fiamea Naomi rose to the ranks of the Deputy Prime Minister of Samoa as part of the HRPP government. In early 2021, she resigned from the HRPP party after opposing changes to Samoa's constitution and judicial system. Fiamea took the helm of Fa'atuatua i le Atua Samoa Uatasi, the FAST party,
Faith in
March
God.
2021. And led Samoa to a new
United
era in politics after a tightly contested election, a month-long political impasse, and a series of court appeals. Finally sworn into Parliament on May 24, 2021, Fiamea Naomi Mataafa has now made history as Samoa's first female Prime Minister and the first in the South Pacific region. For overall Samoan politics, this is the first change of government in 40 years.
That's a picture of her father, the original Prime Minister. So that's finished there. How do I stop this?
Welcome to this year's presentation of the Peter Tolley Coleman Lecture on Pacific Public Policy. The namesake for today's lecture was the longest serving governor from an American territory or state representing American Samoa. Coleman was a graduate of Georgetown University and was an exceptional advocate for Pacific voices. I'm reminded of his words, "Come, let us build the future in partnership." In keeping with the governor's words, the Center for Australia, New Zealand, and Pacific Studies at Georgetown University and the Center for Pacific Island Studies at the University of Hawaii have partnered to bring you the Blue Pacific Futures series. This lecture is part of that series. We are pleased to welcome Prime Minister Fiamea Naomi Mataafa, the Prime Minister of Samoa. After the Prime Minister's speech, she has kindly agreed to answer a few questions. And I'll ask you to use the Q&A function on the Zoom interface to post those questions. Introducing the Prime Minister is Governor Coleman's daughter, Congresswoman Amata Rattawagan, representing the people of American Samoa. Congresswoman, over to you.
E fua mai le mau, e pau mai le whaavau, e mana, tu mau ai ma malu tau ave o Samoa le atu tofi.
From beginning
Pasifika,
until
e o
eternity.
i tu inga o le atu lau, tu lau tapua inga pa ia.
She's
Talofa.
greeting in Samoan language.
Thank you, Professor Tidwell, for that kind introduction. I'm absolutely delighted to introduce your next distinguished speaker because I simply cannot think of anyone more fitting to headline the Peter Tali Coleman Lecture Series at this prestigious university. The purpose of this lecture series is to advance knowledge of Pacific issues, and the opportunity to hear from Prime Minister Afionga Fiame Naomi Mata'afa is timely in every way. She is truly a respected trailblazer and a lifelong leader. She first entered Parliament in 1985 and is the leader of the Pa'atuatue Tua Samoa Watasi, or FAST Party. She has made history as she is the first female Prime Minister serving as the 7th Prime Minister of Samoa. She was also the first female Deputy Prime Minister of Samoa. She is the Member of Parliament from the Lotofanga constituency on Upolu's south coast. Prime Minister Fiame first joined the cabinet in 1991 as Minister of Education, Sports, and Culture. She also served as the Minister of Justice and Courts Administration, and in the last parliamentary term, she was the Minister for Natural Resources and Environment. She has also represented Samoa in the executive boards of UNESCO and governors of the Commonwealth of Learning. She is currently the chair and pro-chancellor of the University of the South Pacific and the chair of the Eminent Persons Advisory Panel in the Pacific Leadership Program, Australia. In addition to Ministry of the Prime Minister, which includes Cabinet Affairs, Immigration, and much more, her ministerial portfolio also includes leadership of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade and numerous other responsibilities. All these historic accomplishments bring further honor to the immense legacy left by her father, the first Prime Minister of Samoa, Fiame Mata'afa Pauwina Mulinu'ulua, following independence from New Zealand. Of course, he knew Governor Waifatali, Peter T. Coleman, well, as they were both first Samoans in modern history to lead their respective island groups in the Samoan archipelago, and in doing so, showed the way for many other places around the Pacific. Prime Minister Fiame's grandfather was a leader in framing Samoa's constitution. Her mother was a diplomat, educator, and public servant. American Samoa shares deep cultural ties and lasting friendship with our neighbors just to the west in independent Samoa. In the Pacific and on the world stage, Prime Minister Fiame represents an historic advancement for women in leadership. She is leading her nation forward as a reliable friend and trading partner with the United States, Australia, New Zealand, and the many Pacific partnerships we share. This audience will benefit from her insights, and I am humbled to introduce to you now Prime Minister Afionga Fiame Naomi Mata'afa. Whaftai soifua.
Eo te moai whaftai atu e lau Fionga ui whatani e lau sanoanga whawheloa i a mesi foi le whapai le mamalu o le atunu o le tula mwharupe. After tele mo le mala aulia, te lona tau ala mai lau fionga. E whai aile nei tau talanga. Ia e au ngā fo i e moli atuai se mau ale tatou malo. Talofa lava and warm greetings from Samoa. Opportunities for office bearers such as myself to speak and to interact with learned colleagues and foreign policy makers at forums such as these do not come too often. It is therefore a privilege and an honor to deliver this year's Peter Tali Coleman Lecture on Pacific Public Policy. I am particularly pleased for this opportunity to speak to you on the subject of Samoa's foreign policy. There would have been many discussions and analysis over the years on the foreign policies of the roles of small island developing states, SIDS, like Samoa, in international relations. Given our smallness and absence of economic or military influence, many will have also pondered the effectiveness of our foreign policy, let alone our ability to mold and influence substantive bilateral or multilateral discourse in pursuit of our foreign policy objectives. This year, on the 1st of June, Samoa will celebrate the 60th anniversary of our independence. We may be young compared to other countries, but in the context of our Blue Pacific region, Samoa was the first Pacific Island country to achieve independence. 60 years of self-government have reaped defining successes in our development efforts, as well as important challenges and lessons learned. Today, I will endeavor to explain Samoa's place in the world, small as we are, and rationale for our international engagements. Samoa is dedicated to actively promoting a diplomacy for peace, security, stability, creating sustainable partnerships, deepening and broadening substantive ties in various fields with countries that have similar values, and maintaining regional peace, security, and stability. The objectives of Samoa's foreign policy are to protect Samoa's independence and sovereignty, to expand opportunities for our citizens to overcome our geographic limits, and, notwithstanding the current challenging environment, to leverage our strong relationships with global partners to build back better post-COVID-19 and to continually address the formidable challenges of climate change, considered the single greatest threat to small island countries of the Pacific and our people's livelihoods. Samoa's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade is responsible for the conduct of our foreign policy and diplomatic undertakings. These are strategically employed to interact and engage with other countries and in regional, international, and multilateral bodies. In pursuing our core interests, several key principles guide the management of our foreign relations, which include Samoa being a successful and vibrant economy, and that we attain political stability and a united society. That our diplomacy include the promotion of friendly relations as a way to protect and advance our government's goals without compromising our national interests. That Samoa is a credible and consistent partner, and that we uphold the rights and sovereignty of all states and the rule of law. Because we are a small island developing state, we have to stand up and be counted when we need to do so. This is an undeniable fact. The decision rests with us to determine how we need to redefine the rules of the game, so to speak, to assure that the rights of our country are adequately protected. Put simply, we have to define the rules as we see them to protect our interests. At the same time, we have a responsibility to strengthen and safeguard our legal and governmental institutions to ensure they are fit for purpose, and that integrity and oversight bodies are empowered with resources and authority to effectively support us in our work. There is no doubt in our mind as to our status or identity as a small island developing state. Many of you will know that Samoa graduated from least developed country status in 2014, prior to hosting the third International Conference for Small Island Developing States, which culminated in the Samoa Pathway. The bid to host was premised on the demonstrable ability of our country to lead its own development, take ownership, manage and implement good governance practices, build human capacity to sustainable levels, use robust national processes and systems, and be held accountable for the use of resources. The transition ensured that Samoa received resources in forms that are flexible enough to allow us to determine utilization towards our national priorities, such as budget support, aligning investment and assistance with national development needs, as identified in former strategies for the development of Samoa. The Samoa 2040 Plan, the 2022 Platform for the Development of Samoa. Samoa has a narrow economic base. We also have the smallest EEZ in the Pacific, and we remain highly susceptible to economic and environmental shocks, especially cyclones and other natural disasters. More and more, natural disasters have emerged as a key determinant of growth in Pacific Island countries like Samoa. Moreover, it is observed that while official development assistance directly contributes positively to economic growth, it also effectively mitigates the negative impact of natural disasters on economic growth if encouraged to be invested in essentials to minimize the human and economic cost of natural disasters. The impacts of COVID-19 have been substantial, particularly on our key sectors of tourism, fisheries, and agriculture. The effects are exacerbated by the impacts of natural disasters and climate change, which further underscore the vulnerability of Samoa. As well, we continue to face challenges in the training and education of our young people and are acutely aware of the far-reaching implications that these have for our children, their families, and our communities. COVID-19 has also and a united society. For Samoa, these conditions are imperative in fostering a successful and vibrant economy, safety and security, and in promoting opportunities for broad-based growth and investment from our world without borders. The events that unfolded following our general elections almost a year ago, last April, created what many called a constitutional crisis. These will be recorded in the annals of Samoa's history as a journey of a mature democracy, which divided and tested the key pillars of our society, our faith, our culture, and the rule of law. Today, my government has made good progress of what we set out to do, and that our ability to be able to achieve these, notwithstanding the many challenges we face as a country and people, is testament to Samoa's continued strong belief in our cultural values, the rule of law, democratic principles, good governance, and the protection of the rights of our people. Samoa currently enjoys diplomatic relations with 105 countries, with whom we have shared values and cultural understanding. Where there are differences, we look at ways to interact with each country so that engagement is more productive and beneficial. As a Pacific Island country and a small island developing state, I should note that more often than not, the similarities and the interests of Samoa with other Pacific Island countries and SIDS meant that there were more factors uniting the leaders of our Blue Pacific region and SIDS than there were dividing them. About how good governance and transparency, open media, fostering participation, domestic cohesion, and developing resilience all help nurture our economic prospects and thereby our independence and sovereignty. I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister. That was a most informative and wonderful presentation. I'm sure that there are questions in the audience forming as we speak. I might just press you just for a moment as we wait for those questions to come in. I just might press you a little bit further on the question of regional stability. You know, the past year and a half, the past 2 years have been, of course, tremendously challenging for everyone. With COVID, of course, isolating people in their homes and in their countries. And then there have been the other challenges of political change. And you certainly had that challenge in Samoa. And the other challenge, of course, in the Pacific has been on the question of Micronesia's participation in the Pacific Island Forum. And I was wondering if you could reflect a little bit more pointedly on the Pacific Island Forum, and what is Samoa's position about inviting our Micronesian friends back into the forum? If you could speak directly to your Micronesian partners, what would you say?
I think work is already being done to reclaim the unity of the Pacific family. It was an unfortunate situation. But then, you know, you don't really know until it happens. And perhaps the leaders had not thought about the outcomes of, you know, taking particular decisions. But when it became apparent that the North Pacific side of the family felt excluded, I think that was the message which was received by the rest of the leaders. And in the Pacific way, we're not about excluding people, you know, we're an inclusive community. So I can say that work is already on the way to find a mechanism by which our family in the North can return to the fold, so to speak. But it has been quite challenging also, you know, with the COVID situation. I mean, internationally, I mean, like this meeting, we're having to meet virtually. So, you know, to try and have the kinds of meetings to provide a way back for the North has been quite challenging because we have not been able to talanoa, which is a face-to-face consultation. But we're hoping for the leaders to have a meeting in June. And by then, hopefully we'll have resolved the issue of bringing back the Northern members of the forum. I did make a very strong point, Dr. Tidwell, that for small island country regions like the Pacific, a collective stance is so much more important for us, not only for our immediate interests as interacting as a community, but also ensuring that our voice is heard on global platforms. So it's very important for us that the Northern Pacific side of the family comes back into the fold.
Thank you very much. I'd like to turn now, if I could, to a few of the questions that are appearing in the Q&A function. And the first question comes from Emil Freiberg in Washington, D.C. And Dr. Freiberg asks, he observes the BBC reported on the support you have had from female friends. Could you comment on how the Margarita Circle has supported you over the past 2 years?
Well, you know, it's really interesting. Here we are talking about global issues and so forth. But ultimately, in all our journeys, it's those who, you know, who are immediately behind you, not necessarily seen by the public. But the story behind the Margarita Circle is essentially, you know, just a bunch of friends. I resigned from the last administration, and they turned up at my house and said to me, what do you want to do? Do you need any help? You know, and how can we do that? So what I wanted help with essentially was to begin public forums and to discuss these 3 controversial bills that we're processing through, and the reason why I had resigned. So we developed these public forums, starting off with young people in the urban area, business communities, because there was a consultation process taking place through the parliamentary process, and they were hitting all the traditional, you know, constituencies. But we wanted an approach where, you know, we were meeting, you know, smaller communities, particular interest groups, and especially targeting young people and women, which are not necessarily heard through the more traditional consultative processes. So we started, well, with the help of the friends or the Margarita Circle, and it was very successful. And then when I joined the FAST Party, they also then formalized a roadshow process by which they took, you know, the broader party manifesto out to the country. But yeah, so really, you know, it's like most of us, especially those in the, you know, in the political field. I'm sure the Congresswoman also understands this. You know, you have levels of support. And it was interesting, someone said to me, the BBC, you know, are they my kitchen cabinet? I said, no, they're not my kitchen cabinet. You know, they're my moral support. They are all professional people in their own right. The funniest thing is that they're all political virgins, you know, never been involved in politics, but had a feeling that, you know, they were living in a country that they weren't very happy where it was going. And I suppose this was their way to make a change that they were wanting to do. So yeah, that's the background of the Margarita Circle.
Thank you so much. Just moving now to a slightly different topic. This is from Hazen Williams, and Hazen asks, really looking towards Singapore becoming a dialogue partner of the Pacific Island Forum. And Hazen is wondering, what role do you see Singapore playing in this role as a dialogue partner? And I suppose, you know, the question really is, what are you looking for from Singapore? And, you know, is this going to be influential in the Pacific Island Forum?
Singapore has quite strong bilateral relations with foreign member countries, including, of course, Samoa. Singapore, of course, internationally has made a reputation for itself, process through which, you know, they can engage at yet another level with our region.
Samoa and the other Pacific Island countries, particularly thinking about things like transnational threats, the illicit drug trade, gangs, illegal fishing, natural resource management, and so on. Help us think more broadly about what it is that we can do to assist Samoa.
Well, I think, you know, the geopolitical arrangements were such that the US had its focus elsewhere than the Pacific. So we have noted that there's a renewed interest for the US. I mean, we have, but just speaking on Samoa, we've had the charge d'affaires office, which is attached to your Wellington embassy. That office has been with us for a while now. And, you know, we've had various development projects through them. Of course, the largest project the US has with us is the Peace Corps. Partners within the region to with the US. If I could give an example, a representation here of your American government.
That, you know, we have this this draft security agreement that the New Zealand foreign minister had suggested might destabilize the region, and others have made a similar sort of comment. And I was wondering if you share that view, that that security agreement between the PRC and Solomon Islands has the potential of destabilizing the region and bringing unwanted elements of strategic competition to bear in the Pacific region.
I'd just like to say talofa to Dr. Popes. She's another young lady who has ties to Samoa through her family and their service here during the New Zealand administration. Yes, it's become very topical, the agreement in the Solomons and China. I think at the outset, can I just say that this is another development that is occurring now in the Pacific and the interests in the geopolitical discourse and activities. I think in the normal way, I think I spoke to like the dialogue partners for the forum. We have the core members who, you know, live in the region, and our dialogue partners brought in, you know, our development partners outside the region, which includes China, of course. Now, it's sort of the discourse seems to be, you know, what is seen as an internal arrangement versus what is now appearing to be external arrangements of the forum members. Well, at the outset, I think, you know, Solomons as a sovereign country, we have to respect the choices that they make. I think this is a growing reality and another facet that is developing in the Pacific. And it's going to present us with matters that we will need to address and to address more, you know, quickly, as opposed to leaving it in the back burner. So I'm very keen as the leader for Samoa to raise this issue with the forum family. We do have security agreements, the Bikatawa, the Boe arrangements. And I think the discussion needs to be held in that context, as opposed to, oh my gosh, Solomon Islands is siding up with China. You know, I think we need to take a broader view And I think we also need to very quickly as a region come to terms with a reality that is developing. I don't think, you know, it's in our interests sort of stick our heads in the sand and say, oh, you know, either we wish it would go away, we wish it wasn't happening, but just have very clear discussions. And first and foremost, as a region, come to an understanding of how we manage our relations internally and externally. You know, in terms of the Solomon Islands, I don't need to explain to you
Okay, maybe that's enough. John?
Yes,
Still
thank
there?
you. Yeah, I'm still
Yes.
here. Yes, we were all
Anyway,
used up the
but
entire.
just to give you some idea of some of her thoughts on things and some of the issues she touched on. It was interesting that this Peter Talimau Coleman lecture series it seems like an ongoing thing, and perhaps, you know, through UPF, you know, we can also have a brand kind of lecture series like that we could invite prime ministers to, or and discuss like this. So anyway, I thought it would be an interesting thing to make everyone aware of how the islands look at our region's issues. So that's what I wanted to share today.
Right. Thank you, Reverend Seti. Thank you for sharing what's happening in Samoa. There's not, well, we're actually gone past time, but if there are some people that have some comments, I mean, I can read one of the comments that put in the chat, that it's refreshing to hear the PM. She's right about Northern family felt excluded in the option to be voted in the forum. And then also she's very careful in her sharing and not really saying her views clearly. So it's hard to say if she's pro or against what's happening in the Solomons in regards to China. Who would like to make a comment? Yes, Reverend Kenji, go ahead.
Good morning, the Oceania leaders, brothers and sisters, and thank you, the Reverend Seti, to give us the very relevant topic this morning. And I was also really concerned about what's going on here. Actually, this was already prophesied by the True Father in middle of the year 2000. And yeah, we have been sharing those things in morning Hoon Dok Hae in New Zealand headquarters. Just the three of us, but it's Na and my wife. Anyway, yeah, that's the actually wake up call for us, and we need to do the proactively as a region. And just as I shared before, yeah, really would like to propose to establish a peace and security forum and a fact-finding tour. That's the exactly True Father did for the other regions to develop the Heavenly Foundation. And really would like to discuss further with the Reverend Yutaka and the President Hori when he comes. Thank you. Just yeah, brief comment from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we've got Candace down there. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm sorry about that. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Seti. That was pretty enlightening. Just a comment that I just think that because we had a government for the last 10 years that weren't really interested in the Pacific people lost faith in Australia and New Zealand, and I don't blame them. We've really let them down on so many levels. And the Solomon Islands and Samoa signing up with China is a big wake-up call to the whole Pacific. And I actually think it's so good that Penny Wong went over there. She had a Zoom meeting with the other 10 Pacific Islanders who have all agreed to put China's proposal on hold. So that's good news, but I do feel that we as a nation, Australia, who's probably the wealthiest in the whole region, or is the wealthiest, we should really push to help the island people. And I don't know how or what. And, you know, we need to take control of the islands and be the friendly parents. That's all. And I hope somehow we can do that, because China is big. And I'm not saying that actually in the long run, maybe we are going to form a good relationship with China. But as we know, we've got a long way to go before then. Okay, that's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Candice. And last person to speak, go ahead, Margaret.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Reverend Seti, for sharing, bringing Father's words, as already mentioned, of the warning of the unity of the island nation is crucial to be able to battle with the bigger nations' interests. And so of the idea of the High School of the Pacific to educate the Pacific Islanders was crucial also. Unfortunately, the school closed. But it's not a lost cause. We can still do what we're thinking here in Palau is to, I mean, the president in Palau is already a very strong Taiwan supporter and is not shy in speaking out. So that is a good thing. But before we came to Palau, we did speak with Dr. Ward at UTS about the COSA material, because what I see is that many of our leadership in the Pacific do not know the danger of communism. And because the island nations are spiritually oriented, they will understand the danger of a system that does not have God. So this is what we're doing in Palau, is that we're introducing concepts to different leadership, not just the political leadership, but also to the men leadership, women leadership, as well as NGO leadership. It has to be taught across the board for everyone to know that this is beyond just political. This is now, and Christians understand the last days. The last days is when evil begins to master its force, and therefore Christians have to be united to fight this force. And with the danger of communism, meaning God-denying ideology, we cannot have this in our islands. So, but I truly feel that UPF should, I did recommend this long time ago, that UPF, through our own connections with our political system, our presidents, UPF can be a presenter at the forum as a partner, presenting a different voice other than just economic and all this kind of stuff. These are earthbound concerns that Christians understand. But first, we have to secure that the islands retain their God position. And so anyway, thank you, Reverend Seti, for sharing your Prime Minister talk this morning.
Just briefly, you know, apparently, you know, nations like Cambodia are making formal relationships with UPF and such associations. And I feel like the associations that Mother made, and especially lately IAYSP, now a UN level NGO, but every effort we make in those areas like academia and through the universities, Zooms and stuff like that, I think really they all count to create this kind of federation. You know, not exactly formalish, but I think Women's Federation, UPF, and IAYSP has the capacity to be invited by governments to deal with them. If we present well in a formal, pulling in our VIPs or our friends, So anyway, that's kind of the feeling I get looking at this kind of possibility. And I was quite inspired when I saw this video. You hear a lot of rumors, and listening to you in Australia and New Zealand, you also sound like you're affected by a lot of the rumors too. But you got to work through the processes, get to the facts, and you got to work through the government, the processes that are there. After the blessing yesterday, I spoke to a young civil lawyer who was in the midst of making policies for the villages from government, and one person could influence how the policies were made in the give and take between government and the villages and the regions. So that's really exciting, and that's the capacity that we can look at, utilizing things like Washington Times, Segi Times, Segai. That's the firepower we have, but we just gotta, put it all together and approach our governments on islands in a formal way, not just as ad hoc missionaries kind of popping up out of nowhere every event, but we got to package it well. And we have that capacity now. And we have that legacy of what we've done in the past. We're trusted people on the NGO level, So I think it's a harvest time on that level. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Yes, it's certainly a serious issue, and that's true. UPF collectively needs to have its input. It's time now for us to offer our prayers, and I'll just bring up the screen. Let's pray together. Arju, Arju, Arju. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day, and see you all tomorrow. Okay. Bye.